Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. Welcome. Today, my guest is Nathan Wiens. This is someone that I've known for quite a while, and I think he's an excellent example of how agency can help even a mature man to reach his true potential. Welcome, Nathan. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Excellent. So, Nathan, you have a really fascinating story of your life, and it's taken different arcs, it's taken different directions. And I'd like you to tell me where you'd like to start that story, and we'll work forward from there.
So, I grew up in a fairly liberal household. Both my mother and stepfather were college professors, psychologists. So, and I grew up in Central California, so kind of a liberal area, but actually that part of California is a little conservative. But so that's kind of the household I grew up in. And sort of as time went on, I discovered that sort of way of looking at things really didn't fit me. So I found a lot of other people. I've had some really amazing mentors over the years who have shown me what it means to be a man, how to develop agency, even though it's a term that I didn't really come across until just recently. But it's been a real progression from being somebody who didn't have a whole lot of, sort of self-responsibility and wanting to move and, just sort of blaming other people if things went wrong with me, to learning how to accept responsibility, to move forward on my own. I got to say, my time in the military was really helpful with that. The military, or at least up until recently, was one of the few institutions in America where building agency was still an integral part of everything that they do. So
yeah. I remember when I was talking with you too, you mentioned because of your parents' background in psychology, you were familiar with a lot of the topics we were discussing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very interesting how the topics aren't necessarily strange. The conclusions and the way the concepts are being used by psychologists in general, not all psychologists, but in general, and the way they're being used by society doesn't jive with a masculine mindset. It doesn't connect in the same way with men. And it's almost as if psychology was developed to treat a very feminine mindset. And so it does tend to work better on women. Cry it out, show your emotions. Let's talk about our problems for hours on end. And that I think that is good for women a lot of times. I still think women can benefit from a little bit of that get something done mindset that men prefer as their treatment. But for men, it's completely ineffective. Most men, they find it irritating, and then they tend to stop, and they don't get any benefit from it. And we really see from the agency course that you took how the actions take all of those concepts and make it something real that you can get your hands around. And that's what men want. I mean, men are very hand focused. We're very, very much focused on our hands, doing things with our hands. You get a little boy, you give him a rock, he can throw that rock and hit a target right away. That's just instinctual in the child, because men are like that. And getting our hands around things, so to speak, and being able to do something makes a big difference for any kind of a therapy that will work well for men.
Exactly. And, the agency course is a perfect example of that, of having tasks that we had to accomplish, talking about the theory and kind of understanding behind it, but the actual action part is really, really important. Actually, another group I'm pretty deeply involved in, which you are also part of, is the Sovereign American Project. And up here in the Northwest, we've been doing work parties. So we gather together, and one of the members' houses, or they're in the case of the first one, it was actually one of their businesses, and we worked on a project. He had a conference room that he wanted to put some paneling up and basically kind of transform this kind of storage area into a conference room. So we got together, we did that, and we talked in the process. But it was so much more impactful when we actually had something to accomplish. And the fact that we got as much accomplished as we did was really an amazing example of what high agency men can do when they get together. We actually did a homesteading workshop here at my home last weekend, and everybody got together, and it's everybody kind of shared some things. We actually built a greenhouse. We harvested a pig. We harvested some rabbits and showed everybody how that's done. Just had a great time. And it's really growing amazingly. It's, started out with just kind of started out with the guys. The last one, a few of the significant others joined in. This time it was, wives, significant others, a couple of the people brought their kids. So we had some kids. So it's really becoming a community. But it's all centered around action, which is what men need. And one of the things that they're not getting is that call to action, that that connection with other men through action, through building, through growing, through actually doing something.
Yeah, I think when men are doing therapy and they're sitting around talking, there's a feeling that I'm not producing anything. I'm not doing anything useful. And they get like this itchy feeling, like I got to get up and do something. And there is really, there's two ways that you can open up a guy to get him to really talk about things and to work out his problems, is either to get him drunk. And this is, the ancients talked about this. This isn't my concept. It's been talked about since Greco times. Or you do it while you walk, or do something, some activity, walking as a minimum. Walking is how we got everywhere in the past. So it was practical. You got one place to the other. Jesus walked with his apostles. Almost all the initial Greek philosophers, they would often talk while they walked about the gardens, or while they walked about the Lyceum and the gymnasium. And even in the gymnasium, it wasn't just about thinking. It was, and this is why we're talking about scholar and warrior today, is because they didn't really think of separating these things. You had to be both. The complete man was both. The man who could fight but couldn't think was not viewed any better than the man that could think and couldn't fight. They were both viewed as being incomplete men, childish in a way. And we hear, for example, Plato, and we can disagree with philosophers' outcomes or what they talked about, but Plato, he was a bull of a man. He was a great big solid lump of a man who had to walk sideways through doors, literally. Because he was such a big guy, and he was known as an effective warrior in his youth. And that didn't stop him from being intelligent. Most of the guys that I know that are into martial arts, that are into any kind of combat sport, or that are very physically fit, tend to also be quite intelligent. Yeah. There is a correspondence there. It's not a one-to-one, but it's usually that way. And the men that are intelligent but impractical are very often the ones that have developed their mind, but physically they're not developed at all. They can't do any action with what's in their head. And both of those two are dysfunctional. Those are dysfunctional men. You might even say they're not really quite men yet. They're on the way to being a man, but they haven't developed the full breadth of what it means to be a man. And so they're basically grown-up children.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, in order to develop agency, and one of the things that I talk about in my coaching, and my my motto, if you will, is creating mastery in the forge of thought and action. And agency is a prerequisite to develop mastery, because in order to develop, to go through the 10,000 hours of practice necessary to really master any discipline, you have to have agency. You have to develop agency first in order to do that. And the thing about people who are physically fit, athletes, combat sport, martial artists, soldiers, military people, law enforcement people, all those people, in order to do what to build yourself to the point where you're physically fit, requires agency, and agency requires at least a certain amount of intelligence and imagination to understand why it's important. to be able to do that. And, obviously if you're, going through basic training or going through a police academy or something like that, you've got, instructors who are sort of providing that agency for you. But in order to maintain it beyond that point, you have to have a certain amount of intelligence. You have to have developed some form of agency in order to continue. And that's one of the things why there is that, there's that connection between the two, particularly for men. Women, obviously it's a little bit different. And because we've become such a feminized society, and I'm not just talking about the United States, I mean, worldwide, or at least in a lot of countries, that's the case, where you've got elites who are trying to feminize people because they are, less likely to fight if they're feminized. But unfortunately, that means they're also less likely to produce. They don't create as much. They don't develop, as robust an organization if they're feminized versus masculinized. I mean, when men are feminized,
it's always been like that because men are extremely dangerous. We are nature's top predator, and as the more dangerous half of the species, without agency, we're a danger not just to, it's good to be a danger to your enemies, but you become a danger to your own people. Right. Because you don't have impulse control. And that's a big part of what agency is about, is controlling your impulses. Now, the reason that we look at a highly fit person or a highly trained person, whatever it happens to be, whether it's in martial arts or the operation of a weapon, or, even in a highly trained artist or tradesperson, is they have had to focus on something, ignoring the impulse to give up, ignoring the impulse of perhaps pain or fear, in order to get through something that's very difficult. And that control, that long-term regular control of your impulses, that allows people to operate in a way that is safe. And this is extremely important for people who are operating dangerous things. If you're operating a firearm, if you've been tasked with protecting the public, there's a reason why women are about twice as likely to shoot you. Female police officers about twice as likely to shoot you as a male police officer. It's not just because he's physically larger and has less fear. It's because he has less of that impulse control issue, because men have been bred to be good at controlling their impulses, and it's been less important for women, although it's still important. Yep. And so they're also the women are facing a much greater fear impulse because they're smaller. And the combine of that means that it's safer to have men as police officers than it is to have women, both for the officer and for the public. Right. But it's like that with a lot of things. Men who do not have a high level of impulse control are not going to be successful at anything. Right. No matter where they are in life, they're gonna fall down on. And this is why a lot of men credit their martial arts training in youth for their success later in life, or even their sports training. They take that ability to discipline themselves and they move it over into the corporate world, into their relationships. If you can stand in the face of a man who wants to punch you and knock you out and not show fear, it's not hard for you to walk up and talk to a girl. Right. All that other stuff becomes easy. All those other things become a lot easier. It's not hard for you to talk to your boss and say, look, the current situation isn't good. You're going to have to give me a raise or whatever, or, this is intolerable, whatever it happens to be, or the company needs to make a change or we're going to go bankrupt. I talk to these people in corporate positions all the time. They're like, everybody in my company knows we're going bankrupt, but nobody will say anything. And it's because nobody has the ability to stuff their fear down into a little box in their gut and forget about it while they do something that needs to be done. And that is not something that you can muster if you've never done it before. It's the kind of thing it takes practice.
Yeah. And, team sports used to be something that every boy did at some point. They got them into sports. In other cultures, everybody learned how to fight. I mean, the Greeks, the Romans, I've always had a soft spot for the Japanese culture, which is another non-Western, but really, an extraordinary culture. And if you look at all the really successful civilizations, all the really successful cultures in the world, they're all warrior cultures because of the importance of learning those things, of learning to be physically adept as well as mentally adept. And the integration of the two is what produces really extraordinary men, and really produces men, period. And
yeah, what we call an extraordinary man today, our ancestors would have said, well, that's a minimum requirement to become a man. It's theoretically, we're probably taller and stronger. If you're guys that exercise like us, you're probably taller and stronger than your ancestors, simply because they didn't get a lot of food. They got a good quality, but not a lot of it. But in the attitude, in the mental attitude, we're talking people that they said, oh, would you like to get on this boat? There's an 80% chance you're going to die, but we might find the new world. And guys, and then, sign me up. There's a waiting list. Sorry, we don't have enough boats for everybody. You'll have to wait till the next time the suicide mission comes around. And guys are like, darn, I'm going to have to go home. I'm going to have to go home, and wait till next time.
Men have an inherent drive for challenge. And actually, I just recently started reading a book called The Talent Code. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But it's basically, it's a journalist or a writer who started looking into these pockets of kind of brilliance. This tennis club, this little tiny rundown tennis club in Russia that's produced more top 20 tennis players than the entire United States. And it comes down to a very specific type of practice. And the book's I guess it's about 11 or 12 years old now. So I'm not sure what kind of the latest research on this is, but where this comes from is this idea of learning as a function of the myelination of neurons. So it's not just that you're developing when you practice. It's not just that you develop new neural pathways. It's actually that when you do this kind of slow problem-solving kind of practice, you actually create additional. So myelin, for those who don't know, myelin is this kind of fatty coating that goes on top of mostly motor neurons, but neurons that run through the body, and it insulates them, and it allows the motor impulses to move faster. So the more myelin that's on these particular motor, these motor neurons, the more efficiently they operate. They use less energy. They get the messages there faster and more accurately. So, and what they've discovered recently is that by practice, you actually increase the amount of myelin, of these myelin sheaths that you have on the neurons of those particular pathways dealing with that particular skill. And that, so talent, what we call talent, isn't really talent. It's just this myelin on these particular neurons involved in these motor pathways. So this idea that anybody can extraordinary at anything, you just got to practice enough. But the fact that it involves struggle, you have to struggle to do that. And what occurred to me when I was reading this book was that here is kind of scientific proof that we have to struggle in order to grow. That avoiding struggle reduces us as human beings. Men and women both, but this is especially true of men, because it's our job to struggle. It's our job to move forward, to build things, to produce, in order for women and children to have something to consume. So it's even more
as the
important
world's
for
gotten
us to struggle.
easier. As the world's gotten easier, men have gotten more depressed.
Right.
They
we don't have anything to struggle for.
Yeah. Apparently, in between the First and Second World War, they greatly expanded the mental hospitals and facilities in the UK because they were having this huge issue with depression. And some of the economic things weren't good between the war, but it was more than that. It's that a lot of men were like, oh, I missed out on the war. I was too young. I missed out. Yeah, on dying. Yeah, but maybe not.
Right.
And what happened was the moment that the UK declared war on Germany, the hospitals were empty. There were men who had been in a catatonic state. And when they told them that there's a war on, they popped out of bed and ran off to enlist. They'd been in a catatonic state for weeks. Pop up, I'm fine.
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well, what it was is they don't really want to die. They don't really want to live. They want to struggle. They want to struggle. And that's somewhere in between dying and living, is that they just want to go out and they struggle and do something worthwhile. And society wasn't offering them anything. And I think what's happening now is, yes, society offers you no struggle, but you can create your own struggle. You can choose to voluntarily go out and seek struggle. And we're at that point in human history where instead of seeking comfort, which we always did because we needed to, just staying warm was difficult, let alone getting enough food to eat. Now what we do instead is we have to go out and seek struggle. There's a scene from I think it's the third Back to the Future movie where he's talking to, the doc is talking to people in this old Western town. He says, in the future, we go running for fun. And they all laugh at him and they think he's crazy. They think he's drunk and he's crazy. Running for fun. Why would you burn calories for no reason?
Right.
Well, we're in this stage of human history where we've basically solved the main problems of survival to a point where there's nothing left to do. Any idiot can survive 2021. The real question is that's not good enough. Survival isn't good enough, especially when it's easy, and men, they need that challenge. You can find that challenge and we need a challenge against nature. So that sometimes that's a challenge against our own nature, but we also need the challenge against other men. We need to measure ourselves against other men. We're okay finding out that we're not as good as the other guy, but we need to go and find that out.
Right. And, steel sharpens steel. So by creating that struggle, by, finding men who are better at something than you and learning from them, growing, becoming better at something, finding something you're passionate about and then becoming better at it. That's how we become healthy. That's what men need. We need struggle. We need challenge. We need a chance to be heroic. And that's what is, you're right. I mean, it's lacking. All the, we don't have to struggle to survive anymore, to have warmth, to have food, to have those things. So we have to find something else to struggle for. We have to find something else to allow us to grow beyond where we are now. Because if we stagnate, we die. And the fact that society seems to be telling men, and even more so boys, that if you try to struggle, if you try to grow, that's, I don't know, patriarchal or
toxic masculinity.
It's toxic. Yeah, it's right. It's toxic masculinity. It's it's sexism because you're because you're stronger than a woman.
If you want to stand on your own 2 feet, apparently that level of individualism, taking personal responsibility, now it's being called white supremacy. It's absolutely, and what that does is that says, oh, you're not white. Oh, that means you're incapable of even understanding this concept, because this concept is white supremacy. You can't possibly take personal responsibility for yourself. And if you do, you're an evil white person. It literally says everyone is bad.
Right. And
no one is acceptable.
Yeah. And I was actually talking to my stepdad about this. I just visited my mom down in Mississippi, which is why I got a little extra sun. But we were talking about that it's, oh damn, I lost my phone. This idea that they're demonizing us, people of European descent, people who embrace Western culture as evil. They're denigrating and considering us to be evil for our virtues, not for our vices.
Yes.
Which this is something that I think a lot of people have had a really difficult time with, and have been in a state of denial about that. Well, we don't do those things. We're not really, we're not racist. Why are they calling us racist? Well, they weaponize that term to, try to get stuff out of you, because the way that you prove you're not racist is to give them money and stuff.
Well, this is something we talk about even in the agency courses, how we get programmed by these things. So they program you to associate this particular word with double extra naughty and bad, and you shouldn't do it, and guilt and shame. And then they can take the word like a club, and every time they hit you over the head, they get compliance.
Right.
And when you have agency, that doesn't work anymore. They're impotent. Right. They can beat you all day long with naughty names and things they want to call you, and you just laugh at them because it's funny to you that they even think that could make a change in your way that you view yourself. And most people today, though, they're surrounded by that programming. And the way programming works is that there will be a dominant narrative that runs through your life, and that will program you. And there's nothing you can do to stop that from programming you unless you can change the dominant narrative, which means separating yourself from the people that are saying those things. Don't watch network television. Don't go and seek out situations where you're being programmed the wrong way, and take the time to think about what you're being programmed with so that you can undo what's been done to you.
Right.
A lot of young men today who are depressed, I ask them what it is that's really deep down inside, and I dig around and I dig around. You saw this happen in the course with all the men. Yeah. Deep down inside, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And some cases, I'm not worthy of even love. I think the older guys had already come to some improvements about that. And so it was just a matter of getting to the next level. For the younger guys, I'm not even worthy of love, they feel. I'm not, and that means they're not worthy to love themselves, which means why should you work on improving yourself? And so dealing with that deep down programming, when we're told over and over again that you're not any good, your natural instincts are all wrong and evil. Right. That beats young men down, and they hear this all their life. And very often they never hear a counter narrative. They never hear it.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what we're both working on changing. So just a moment to, for those of you out there, to plug Noah's Path to Manhood course on Gumroad. So he's actually doing something about this. I actually just signed up a little while ago myself, and you and I had talked about wanting to have some, because the course is mostly for 18 to 24, 25-year-old men who are just starting out and really need some help developing agency, learning how to become men. But also, you and I talked about having some older men like myself and some others who have had some life experiences who can act as mentors, because you've already got, what, about 50 guys or so? So that's more than you can.
Yeah, we're doing a purge of all the unactive people. I actually had someone write me a bot so that if they're unactive too long, it warns them and says, you need to participate. Nice. Because the way you pay into this, and there will be a cost once we have more than 50 active members, because it starts becoming a lot of work. It's almost like having 50 kids. And it almost gets that way depending on how active people are. But the more active they are, the more that they're growing, the faster they're progressing, and the more encouraging it is to others. And one of the examples is that the young men are encouraged to give a physique photo at least once a week, so that they can compare their weekly progress in physicality. Some of the guys were saying, well, I didn't really see any change one week to the next, so I didn't think it was necessary to post again. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of that, they said, wait a minute, I think I figured it out. That's the purpose of posting every week. So if I don't make progress, it's obvious to everyone. Right. Now I can make some progress. And it's the same with everything. Joining that group for young men, they're going to get physically fit. They're going to get psychologically fit, emotionally fit, financially fit, which is a huge one for young men. So many young men today are like, I know this girl, I want to get married, but I don't have enough money. Mm-hmm. It's not like boomer generation where you could just go to the local Ford factory and, sign up for 50 years of nonstop work for enough money you could buy a house on. 2 weeks in, you can afford to buy a house. Right. For a lot of us, for people that are now in their 60s, so the boomers, they could buy a house for between 1.5 and 2 times their annual income.
Right.
One of my young Canadian clients was telling me where he lives. He's almost finished becoming a tradesman. So when he'll have his full journeyman, which means that's basically as high as he can earn as tradesman.
Right.
And he said he's there. So a house costs about 12 times his income, yearly income.
Ooh.
Which means after you take a loan, you pay twice as much basically for a house when you take a loan. So he'd have to work nonstop for 24 years to afford to buy a house.
Oh man.
How can young men get married?
Right. Right. I mean, how can you raise a family if you don't have a place? Yeah.
Yeah. No, there are places where it's better. He was checking around. There's places in the US where it's 4 or 5 times income, but that's still insane compared to what it was back in the 50s. And we make more now. The problem is that everything is so expensive.
Right.
And, it's not like in many areas you're competing with women. You're not in the trades. It's not really an issue. So you haven't had that dilution effect, but you have had that. It's even worse for men that are, graduating from college. Now they have 5 years they haven't been working. Plus they have a massive amount of debt. And women, the same thing. I had female clients say, I'm 32. I have $150,000 in college debt from 10 years ago.
Man,
back then it was only 50,000. Now I have 120, and
I
really want to have babies, but I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And the only option they have is to not marry. They want to get married to their fiance. Their only option is to not get married. So you can't declare bankruptcy, but they can not get married, and he won't get the debt unless they get married, and she can just never work again because they'll garnish her wages. And she literally has to be essentially an educational refugee. And these are the kind of situations people are in. And, this is why I'm focused on these guys 18 to 24, 25 years old, because it's before they screwed up and made these big unalterable decisions that we can get them on that correct path so they don't end up in that position. Even so that they may want to move part of the country to a better place, whatever it happens to be. If you're a young single man and you're not connected and you don't have a network, because that's part of joining these groups, you get a network.
Right. Yeah.
I have a massive network. You have a massive network. Yeah. And then their network to us means they have access to our network in a way as well.
Right.
And so it gives them a chance to say, hey, look, where else in the country can I move? What else can I do? This is going to become more and more important for young people in the future. They want you to be disconnected from other men. They want you to not have options, because this way they can take from you without giving you anything in return. And men who are smart, they're out there creating these options. They're joining networks. They're joining fraternities. It's really a fraternity is what it is.
Right.
And this is, it's a training program and a fraternity. And once I start graduating guys, I'm going to bring all them back in as trainers.
Good.
My idea is what I call masculine evangelism. So it's men building men who will build more men. And at a certain point, I could step back and it's a fire that's been started that even I can't put out. It's just going to burn on its own. And that's really my long-term goal. That's the only way we're going to counter the trillions of dollars of anti-masculine propaganda, anti-Western propaganda, basically anti-personal responsibility propaganda that we're facing. A lot of they've basically done such a number on women that they've changed their focus over to men about, I would say it was about 10 years ago. They were so focused on women for almost 100 years, getting them out of the house in the work, basically turning them into less effective men.
Right.
And now that they've done that, they want to take the men and turn them into less effective women.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking about this, I've been thinking about this for a while now, that one of the kind of fundamental issues that we're dealing with right now is that things are so out of balance between masculine and feminine. And this isn't just kind of a societal thing. I mean, this is in terms of nature, this is a real problem, because nature does not tolerate massive imbalances for very long. And if we don't fix the problem, nature will. And when nature fixes problems, it's bad. I mean, it's it's harsh. It's way harsher than if we fix this ourselves. So, we're trying to counterbalance that, to try to bring things, try to get the pendulum to start swinging the other way, because it's so far toward the feminine that if you reach a point where nobody's producing anything, then everybody dies.
Yes.
So,
and historically, when cultures went towards the feminine, that actually went into these fertility cults, and they'd start having loads of kids and stuff. And there was no birth control. Lots of promiscuous sex. When things tend to go to the feminine, they also lose structure. And it's actually men that say no sex before marriage. It's not women doing that. It's married men. It's married men who already have a woman, so they're not going to be affected by that, who say no sex with my daughter unless you're going to marry her, because I don't want to have to take care of her and all of her offspring when you leave. Right. And so that's what it is. And they put those rules on society. And that's a big part of what creates an ascendant society is sexual controls primarily on women. What happens when it becomes too feminine is all the controls go off, and you used to have these fertility cults, which would, be constant orgies and tons of kids. But actually it's even worse now, where we got the tons of orgies, we got no children coming out of it. Right. So it's worse. It's like it's a sterile, ugly, what do you call it? Not male or female, androgynous society. That's not, it's got like all the worst stuff, because a lot of feminists are essentially have all the worst characteristics of what they call toxic masculinity, along with not having any of the good characteristics of being a woman. And the same thing for the men that have become effeminized. They end up having all the toxic female characteristics without any useful male characteristics. And so we end up with the worst of both. And that is why there's such nihilism. And you mentioned nature reasserting itself. Yeah. I talk to a lot of young people, they haven't lived very long, and they haven't often studied history, and they see these trends, and they basically see us going off a cliff. And they say, oh my God, we're all going to die. The end of the world is coming. Oh, it's going to be horrible. Because they are extrapolating a short-term, unsustainable trend out into 20, 30, 40 years from now, where it just can't go. You can't extend that far. There won't be anybody to extend it to. Right. So who is going to rule the next 30 years? It's going to be people like you, people like me, who create our networks, who have children, not just physical children, but what I call spiritual children. And I don't mean it in a religious way, but I mean it in that they are our spirit as men. Our masculine spirit, our masculine fire has ignited these men that are around us and has turned them into better men. And, I got 3 sons. I have dozens of young men that will become my spiritual children. Yeah. And they will have dozens of men that they train. And that network is going to sit there waiting until society is weak enough. And when society is collapsed far enough, it's these highly functional, highly successful men, when they say it's done, it's enough, then it's done. And there's no arguing with them, and there's no fixing that. There's no going back. Right. And that's what we wait for in society. It's not the hyper active, dysfunctional, what people call the far right. It's usually a bunch of young dysfunctional men. No, it's the fathers. It's the business owning men. It's the men that, look at the American Revolution. Oh yeah. The American Revolution wasn't an underclass revolution. It was American elites saying, nah, we don't like this. We're leaving. And let's buy an entire army worth of gear and let our neighbors help us out in this fight. Yeah. And that, you actually have a letter from one of your ancestors. I think it was you, wasn't it? Talking about requesting equipment. Was you? No. Okay. No, it was one of my other clients. It was, his ancestor saying, okay, we'd love to form a regiment, but we don't have any gear. We don't even really have good winter coats. So wow. Those men, those were not losers. Those were men with wives and kids and farms. Those were gentlemen farmers, but they were very poor gentlemen farmers. Right. It is the middle and middle up successful, but not at the very highest level of men that tend to lead these type of things, these type of massive changes when it comes time, because it threatens their future and the future of their children.
Yeah.
And right now they have switched. They were going after women, which I consider also an attack on children. But they're going after women. Then they went after men, and they figure men are beaten down. Okay, last 10 years, they've done a number on us, because going after women made it easier to then go after men. And now they're going after the children. And this is when men go, okay, that's enough. It's done. And I'm not going to be nice about it anymore. And this isn't going to be solved with votes. You know, we're going to the other box now.
Right.
And go ahead. Yeah,
you're right. But one of the things that we've been talking about at these work parties we've been having is that you're right. It's getting to that point, but at the same time, we don't really need to focus outside ourselves. Society. Yeah, society's falling apart, but we don't need to do anything about that, because the other side has continued to double down on these things that don't work so much. We don't have to do anything. They're doing all the work for us to bring the system down. All we really need to do is focus on ourselves, focus on improving ourselves, focus on, saving these young men. And when we do that, when we teach these young men who have never learned how to be a man, then you're right. We'll be in a position where we can pick up the pieces after this falls apart, and somebody's got to do that.
Yes.
So it's really important that it's us that makes this change, that we're in a position where we can, that we can bring things back to the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah, putting that concept that, when your enemy is making a serious mistake, don't interrupt them, just get out of the way and let them fall. And that's what they're doing now. There is a concept, the Chinese call it the mandate of heaven. It's the idea that your particular government is divinely blessed. And when you lose the mandate of heaven because you haven't treated the people well, and that's actually what it is. It's about serving the people's interests. And it's interesting that such a totalitarian government does recognize that to a certain extent you need to serve the interests of the people. Then you lose this mandate of heaven, and then your government it's just a matter of time before it falls, and it's replaced with a new government that gets a mandate of heaven. And there is a kind of, whether it's divine, whether it's spiritual, or whether it is the combined attitude of the people towards their government, which is the spirit of the people, how it feels towards the government. Right. That is something that can change on a dime. And suddenly people say, we don't support you anymore. Now, this doesn't mean people will rise up against the government, but when it loses its support, things just fall apart. Right. It takes a lot of work to maintain a nation, to maintain a government. And when people aren't supporting it, then no one has to tear it down. Nature tears it down. It just falls apart very, very quickly.
Yeah, and it's really about one of the phrases that I read somewhere that really stuck in my mind is the removal of consent, where we simply stop supporting, where we simply stop cooperating, because any national government, particularly one the size of the United States government, requires a huge amount of cooperation from its citizens to continue functioning. I mean, if everybody stopped paying taxes, the government is out of money in a few days, and if there's not, because how do you borrow money if there's not anything coming in to pay back whatever you're borrowing? So,
well, and you can drastically reduce, you can do the functional equivalent of stopping paying taxes by living in a community where you pool resources to create physical goods that you need to survive, and say, hey, unless we need to trade with the outside, or we barter, but otherwise we're cool just the way we are. We're eating food. And what happens in those cases, and we see the Mennonites are an example of that, then what do they invest in? Where do Mennonites put their wealth? Now, they do tend to have some money around because they're very smart with it. They don't really buy anything. They either buy land, or they have more children. So you got these 12 children per woman families. Right. Because what are you going to do when you got a whole bunch of extra money and tons of acreage? You're going to have more kids, right?
Right.
And
Which
that's
is
exactly what we need for the future.
Right. So one of the things you mentioned before we went on that that I did want to talk about in terms of the agency course was how, even though I'm established, I mean, I'm a physician assistant, so I have a career, have a profession. I've been in the military. I was, I'm a combat veteran. I served in Iraq in 2005. So I've accomplished quite a bit in my life. There's a picture of me. That's one of Saddam's main palaces. It's actually where the generals lived. Apparently, they have solid gold toilets and stuff in that place. So
lovely.
Yeah. Actually, if you wouldn't mind putting up the picture, the one other picture of me in uniform with my grandfather, I did want to talk about that for just a second. Yeah. So this was taken in 2004 with my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran. And this is in Washington, D.C. We actually, my whole family went to the opening of the World War II Memorial. And my grandfather was the only other person in my immediate family who served in the military. And this was shortly after I was informed that I would be deploying to Iraq. So being able to make that connection with him was really an amazing experience. And he's somebody, he worked his whole life. He was, some of the stuff that he did in World War II was pretty amazing. So being able to have that connection with him was a really powerful thing. And it's one of the things that I think as men that's the reason why we are what we are. It's our ancestry. And actually I recently went on Ancestry.com and discovered that my mom's side of the family goes back. The first ancestor on my mom's side that I've discovered came to America in 1587. So we've been part of this country for a long time, and actually I have ancestors who have fought in every conflict in American history, with the exception of Vietnam. I don't have any relatives that fought in Vietnam that I know of. But I had several ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War. The point I was making what I wanted to get to was that even though I've accomplished a lot of things in my life, taking the Pathway to Agency course, buy the book, take the course, was really helpful for me to kind of go to the next level, because there's, none of us ever reaches the top. There's always more to do. And for me, one of the things that I discovered and one of the main kind of tasks or projects that I needed to work on that I started working on at the beginning of the course was getting back in shape and losing weight, because I'd gotten out of shape and wasn't exercising. And I was 260 pounds when I started the course. And even though I'm 6 feet tall, I mean, I had a pretty big gut, and, I was pretty unhealthy. But one of the things that I realized was that because I had worked so hard to create this great life, I have a wonderful wife and 2 great kids, and we live on property in rural Eastern Washington. So it's exactly the place I wanted to live. We've got pigs and chickens and rabbits and dogs and cats and all that stuff. So, but because I'd spent so much time and worked so hard to create this wonderful life, I'd become complacent. I had gotten a little too comfortable with how good my life was. And as a result, I'd let myself go a little bit, physically. So that was a challenge for me, and I've been working on that. I've lost 30 pounds. I'd like to lose about 30 more. My goal is to be under 200 pounds by Christmas time, by Christmas Day. So, and that was what I put out in front of the cohort. And so now I have some accountability there. And
you probably gained some muscle as well, because you're quite physically active. You take Kempo and you're
so I'm
busy. And you move around. You got a big property to look after as well, so you're quite busy.
Yeah, so it's great. I've been a martial artist for a long time, and I just started studying American Kempo Karate, which I'm very, very excited about. It's a really cool martial art, and something that's very rich academically, and has a very deep intellectual or mental aspect, as well as all the physical. It's very effective physical art as well.
Yeah, it's a very American approach to a martial art.
Right. It's very
like,
scientific.
don't
in its
assume
approach.
anything. And it's the high agency American approach. Don't assume anything. Let's start from the beginning and then work our way forward. And it's a really, you could say it's a smart way to do things, but it's really a fantastic mindset to get into. And I think training in martial arts, different martial arts have different mindsets of how they view combat.
Right.
And that will make an effect on you. If you are spending that amount of time in a certain martial arts, you'll pick up their mentality, their mindset of problem solving. And really, martial arts is problem solving. I don't want that guy to hurt me, but I want to be able to hurt him.
Right.
And how do I make that happen?
Yeah. And it's, it's something that I recommend to everybody. And I am strongly of the opinion that one of the most important things that we can do as men is know how to defend ourselves, defend our families, defend others. One of the arts that I studied, it's called Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, and there's something that I came across there called the Warrior's Creed, which I think is good for all men. But the Warrior's Creed goes, wherever I am, everyone is a little bit safer because I am there. Wherever I go, anyone in need has a friend. And when I return home, everyone is glad that I am there. So, and in some ways, I think that's the essence of manhood. But, it's the warrior aspect of being a man is something that has been de-emphasized for a long time. It's another aspect of the feminization of men.
Well, there's a financial aspect to it as well. The warrior class does not produce a good that the elite, the outside of our class elites want. And so if you can tell warrior class people that defending your nation and protecting your people isn't really particularly what we want you to do, go be producers. Go make us money. We can't tax safety. We can tax productive money. So go make money so we can do it. And with 80% of the population being third function people, that is producer class people. Watch my trifunctional videos if you want to know more. And you have a democracy, they end up being the vast majority and believing that, when you're that big of a majority, you think that only what you produce is valuable. There's a tendency towards that. The warriors tend to think what they produce is most valuable. The producers think it's what they produce. Sure. The first function thinks, no, it's art and science. And, so everyone thinks that what they're doing is the most important, which is fine. Until you come up against a warrior culture and you forgot you don't have any warriors anymore, or you sent them all out to plow fields.
Yeah. So, and, or are, teaching them how to be, sensitive and,
basically spiritually castrating.
Yeah. Yeah. All the stuff that's happening with the military right now is just nuts. There was a time when I was very much looking forward to my son perhaps joining the military when he got old enough, but now not a chance. I would strongly discourage him from the military as it stands right now. But
I was talking to some military guys.
Anyone, I would never. Yeah. If anybody asked me, should I join the military? I would say no, absolutely not. Or
at the moment, or a police force used to be a great place for a young warrior-minded man to go and work. Again, they become so woke, they become unfunctional. And I've talked to guys that were in the military, and I'm like, well, how are you guys dealing with this? And they're like, every one of us that's an actual soldier, that's an actual warrior, knows exactly who is going to get accidentally hit with friendly fire the moment that if we have to go into real combat. We're not going to take the person that has a 50% chance of killing themselves anyway with us on a mission, because they're going to be reckless. If a person doesn't know who they are, they can't be trusted to have your back. And so there is, but can you imagine being in that's a terrible situation to put soldiers in. It's already bad enough to know they have to go face the enemy, but to know that they have to face the enemy and a certain contingent of their own side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's horrifying. You know, when I was in Iraq, I was very fortunate to be with some really amazing people. And if you talk to most combat veterans, I mean, I was in an infantry unit, so we were the point of the spear. Now, the fortunate thing is that by the time we got there, and I went with the Mississippi Army National Guard, by the time we got there in 2005, most of the real fighting was already over. It was really more like police work, just kind of trying to find the insurgents. We dealt with a lot of IEDs, but we really didn't have to worry about firefights and that kind of thing. It wasn't like Fallujah or something. But it was still dangerous. I mean, we lost 5 guys from my unit, from my 100-man unit, including a really good friend of mine while we were there. So, but I also knew that pretty much all the guys in the unit were people that I could depend on. So if something happened to me and I got in trouble, I knew that they would help, that they would step up and do what needed to be done. And the fact that that's not the case anymore, even in combat units. I mean, even in combat arms, infantry, special operations, armor, those guys, that they're at a point where I know their morale is really low because they're getting treated like the enemy, by their command. So
a lot of recently, I think it was some people from Biden's administration were basically saying, if you're a Trump supporter and you're in the military, quit.
Yeah.
And I don't think they realize how dangerous that is. Basically, it's saying, if you're a masculine, warrior-minded man, you really need to leave this military and go home with nothing to do, surrounded by guns, with an axe to grind against the government. It's suicidal. This is why, as you said, the system is self-destructing. Most of the Western world, the police forces are operating at between 70 and 50% manpower. Most people don't realize this. The police forces have never been so weak. Doesn't matter how many weapons they have, if they have no will to use them, and there's nobody that's going to hold them. It's not a shortage of, just nowhere in the world there's a shortage of guns. There's a shortage of people that are willing to hold them and use them, and and have the skill to use them effectively. UK police forces are in London is around 50%. Now they filled this out with technician level like police that okay, we lowered by 10 points the IQ requirement, so we let you in. Yes, you are only 4 feet tall and 200 pounds, but we'll get this round suit to put on you.
Right.
I saw recently they tried to shut down a store that was open because of COVID, and they sent a police girl, not a police woman, a police girl. She looked like she had she looked like she was dressed for Halloween. Her hat, like they found a uniform, or they tailored a uniform to fit her, but the hat didn't fit her because they didn't have any of that small. She was this tiny little blonde British flower girl, like a really, really feminine, tiny little girl with curly hair. And she looked so out of place there when they told her to go in the store and tell them that they needed to shut down. And when she tried to walk through the gates, someone put a broom in the gate so she couldn't get in or out. And you could see the look on her face, like, crap, I've fallen for their trap. And she was stuck there. Well, she's supposed to explain this to this great big Polish lady who looked like she could, break that broom handle in half over her knee. And she just looked completely out of place. They're hiring people to fill quotas and body counts. They don't have people to do the job. And we're not just seeing that. It happened first there, but this is happening at the productive level of society as well. Right. The recent outages of the I think it was oil, not gas, it was oil pipelines. Their problem is that they said, it's we can go and manually open the pipes. We don't need to. We just need, someone needs to go down there. They get a cell phone call, open the pipe, close the pipe. We don't need this software. We automated it, but we can turn this off and do it manually for a few weeks until we figure the software out. Okay, great. Where are those switches located and how do you operate them? Well, the guy who knows that, he's like 80 and he retired 30 years ago. And they didn't even have maps of it. And they had no one that understood how to flip those great big switches. Yeah. And that's what's happening. We have a whole bunch of people maintaining civilization that only know how to do so from in front of a desk, in front of a computer.
Right. And that's going to become a real problem. Because I mean, if all you've got is a 2-year-old to fix your computer network, you're in trouble. But even more than that, if you don't know how to fix, if you can run the software, but you don't know how the physical machinery works, and that breaks down, you're screwed, because there's no software patch that's going to fix a broken part on a machine. So,
or heaven forbid, a mass power outage or an EMP or something like that. And this is why it's so important, is because the reality is it's not going to be some dainty lady that gets sent out to flip that switch. It's going to be men that are going to have to go out there and figure it out. And we talked earlier about how martial arts can help you to learn to solve problems better, because it teaches you the process of problem solving. Many times these problems are going to have to be solved by men who have no experience in this area. And they're going out for the first time and going, okay, we're all going to die if I don't fix this thing. I got to fix it by sundown. Well, okay, guys, let's see what we can do. And you're going to have to go out there and figure it out. And the more boys and undeveloped men that we can help turn into real men, the softer the fall will be on civilization. As civilization collapses, the softer the fall, and the faster that we can come back. People forget that at the fall of Rome, your average housewife and most men, they knew how to start a fire. They knew, you had to do this every morning. They knew how to cook on an open fire. They knew how to slaughter animals. They knew all of the basics of survival. Wealthy people, I mean, the queen, she used to go in with her husband and kids, the current queen, when they were younger, and they would go for a trip in the Scottish moors where they'd stay in a stone hut and she'd make a fire and cook on the fire. And it was quite primitive. Even the highly successful people in society that could be very comfortable knew how to do these things. Nowadays, most people don't even know how to cook if the pieces they're going to cook were handed to them on a silver platter and someone said, there's the stove. They can't survive the good life. How are they going to survive a harsh life? And this is to a large extent, this is a problem of not enough men with basic skills. And, if you can't survive a collapse of civilization, are you really a man? Right. I would say no. I would agree. Say no. And I mean, you certainly won't be after the collapse. You'll be a skeleton.
Right. Exactly. So yes, we have to do as much as we can to save these young men, to make sure that, men of agency are not just focusing on themselves, which is important. I mean, we all have to
our families.
Improve it. Just ourselves and our families, but also to identify and start mentoring, to adopt, spiritually adopt these young men who are without direction, who don't have anybody to help them, who don't have anybody to teach them.
And they can't learn this stuff through a YouTube video or by reading a book or taking a Gumroad course. I have the front door to the programs on Gumroad, but it's not a Gumroad course. There's no course there. You come into the group and then start doing the activities we give you in the group. Right. But you're not going to learn this without a mentor. You're not going to just suddenly go, oh, wait, that's how you be a man. You have to see it. I've had a couple of clients, we're getting like really intense, often sessions. And he says, I'm starting to absorb, it's like I absorb masculinity from you. I'm figuring it out by being in your presence often enough that I start to understand how to behave. Ideally, you're in the US, there are men near you that can find you, seek you out and say, can you be my mentor? And you can do you mentioned how important it is the Sovereign American Foundation members are getting together physically in one location.
Right.
That is 100 times more effective than getting together online. And that's the next step.
Oh,
Once
yeah.
we work out the online stuff really well, we start to actually get people together in person.
Yeah,
and
because we have to.
Yeah, we have to. You take a young boy on a week or 10-day camping trip, and he grows up more in those 10 days than he did the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're
it's
absolutely
the same with
right.
men. Getting involved in some masculine activities. Now, if you're a young man out there, this is what you can do. You can contact Nathan. His contacts are in the comments below this video. Or you can contact me. You can join the Pathway to Manhood group, which is also in the information below this video.
Good.
And then you'll see both of us in there. And go and find yourself a mentor. Join the group. Get in with some of the other young guys. They're forming little teams of 3 to 5 guys, little accountability groups. This way, they kind of take a round circle of who's going to be leader. That somebody's a leader for a while, and somebody else, and they circle around. And you watch out for your brothers. You make sure that they're active in the group and they're posting. And if you're a young guy, that's what you can do. If you don't have access to this, go and find a local mentor. And don't go and say, what can you do for me? Go there with some humility, go there and recognize that he's not your father. He owes you nothing, and go there and figure out how you can add value to his life in exchange for him tolerating your presence and teaching you to be a man.
Yeah.
Because he won't get anything out of it at first. He's going to invest a lot in you before he gets anything out of it. And if you are a man that is mature and masculine, and you're successful, you've got a job, you've got a family, you've made a real life for yourself, don't limit your interests only to your own family, because your kids are going to have to grow up, and they're going to be in the world with all of the unmentored young men that you never helped.
Right.
Or they can be in this world with a bunch of young men that you did help.
Right.
My ambitions in life are too big for my 3 sons alone to fulfill. So this is why I'm adopting all of these young men and influencing all these men, so that the future can be distributed between all these men, and they can fulfill the ideas that I have, that I get them excited about, that I get them involved in as well. And that's how we change the future. It's not the Aristotles of the world that changed the future. They just lit the match. It's all of the people that heard what Aristotle said and said, that makes some sense, and I'm going to make changes in my life because of that. Right. It's that fire that goes on throughout history that really changes the world. And that's what we're doing, Nathan.
Yep. And it's exciting. I mean, it really is exciting. And I can't say enough about how powerful the Pathway to Agency course is. So if you don't know about it, if you haven't found out about it, go to the website, pathwaytoagency.com, I believe is the website.
Website's right now up on the screen so that people can see.
Yeah, there we go. Take this course. It gets said a lot, and it's lost some value, but it will change your life.
Yeah, and especially if you want to mentor other men one day, if you want to be a leader in your community, you need to get yourself squared away first.
Right,
and
exactly.
you might think you're all squared away because you've done a lot in your life, and you'll find you get into this course, if there's any chink in your armor, it will be exposed. If there's any failing in your training, you're going to find it, you're going to fix it, and you're going to come out of it pretty much invincible. There's no way that society's going to get their little grip, their little talons in you and rip you apart, because you've got it all covered. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's what freedom is. That's what true freedom is not being controlled.
Yes. And even more, it enables you to get along with other men in a way that allows you to defend your own sovereignty, which is, Sovereign American Project, but we talk about the concept of sovereignty. It's different than the concept of freedom. Yeah. Freedom is free from something. It's free from external control that you don't want. But sovereignty, that requires you to work with other men, because it's the ability to defend that freedom against people who would take it from you. And most of the world, we don't have that, because we don't have a sufficient agency to cooperate with each other at the scale necessary to do that. And that's why we have to build not just our own agency, but the agency of others. Exactly. Thank you so much for joining me, Nathan. It's been fantastic. I'm looking forward to eventually coming down to the States, maybe this fall, and joining you guys. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking at 21 conventions. By the way, if anyone wants to attend 21 convention, DM me, message me, join the men's group and talk to me, because I'll give you a link to get onto that. Right now, it's early bird special, so I think you get 2-for-1 tickets. So I would definitely sign up as soon as possible. But talk to me first. I'll give you an affiliate link. Thank you very much for joining, Nathan. It's been fantastic. This is exactly the kind of high agency message that we want to get out to the world.
Thank you so much for having me on. Take care.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Bye.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.